want that.
You're gonna get us all killed.
Most of you are going to die today.
Girls, girls, girls.
Hi, Principal Burke.
This is the second time you three have been killed this semester. Have you ever been shot here at school before today? Danger lurks around every corner.
You have a heart condition. I've never heard one like yours. It's like you have two hearts. Tell me what happened. I heard this girl crying out for me. She was pulling me closer and closer. We have to find that girl. You are one in a long line. Ferocious, repulsive, magnificent. He took everything he could from her. He's gonna do that to us too. She's alive. I just don't know where she is. I could feel her blood leaving her body. We are all going to survive this. You have to be okay with the pain and the blood.
Hi, everybody. We are back so soon with the night shift. Tonight is a special episode. We're talking tonight about Perpetrator, which is the new film by the amazing Jennifer Reeder, director and writer, who is joining us this evening along with Jenna Haze and Bonnie Burton, my lovely Coven sisters. So, yeah, this is a really exciting one. I rewatched this film the second time this morning, and I believe Jenna did as well. Bonnie, did you get another? Yeah, we love rewatching.
Oh, yeah. This is like I think this is the second or third time. I saw it when it first got on Shudder, and then I watched it again last night for a refresher. And of course, with every good horror film, the more you watch it, the more you discover that you didn't notice the first time around. So this is definitely one of those movies.
Yes, definitely. And we are huge fans here of female directors and writers, blood, just everything. So blood, witchy. We're all about it. So this film was perfect. And when I saw that it was released back in, I think it was Feb, I was like, this is amazing. And this is going to be, I just knew I'm an aesthetics person, and I saw the poster and the trailer, and I was like, this is going to be badass. And of course, I already followed Jennifer, and I was like, I just have this really great feeling. And then when it dropped on Shudder in September, I immediately watched it, and then of course messaged both Jenna and Bonnie, and we're like, we're going to do this film. I'm going to ask Jennifer to come on. We must do it. So, yeah, I'm super excited to have you here, and we thank you so much for coming on and giving us your time. This film, for me, was just so, I guess, really, for me, it was really exciting. You've touched on a lot of, themes throughout your previous films, which are talking about, I guess, a little bit of mysticism, transformation, teenage girls, queer relationships, all of that kind of stuff. And, with this film, then we kind of get this, which I kind of felt like it's almost like a female Cronenberg vibe, which, the little like body fluids, like USB port was like, the first time I saw it, I was like, whoa, like this is, and I guess like, all of these things you do so well. And, then this film, I feel like you just stepped it up like a billion notches. And I know, a lot of, you've done most of your press, and, we're kind of coming off the back end, but I feel like, this is just the perfect opportunity to get to pick your brain about something that we all enjoyed. And just like really, I think really got into it. I must say, I love the casting of Alicia Silverstone. So good. Her performance was incredible, and it was just a delight. Anytime I see her in you know, a kind of an indie alt or whatever film, I'm always like super pumped to see her. So I was like super excited for that. Bonnie and Jenna, do you have anything you want to say?
Yeah,
Just
I mean, well, first of all, thank you for joining us because I know like how busy you are and I know how crazy press junkets can be. I've worked for a studio for many years and also I've been on the other end as an entertainment journalist. So my goal always was during press junkets, don't ask the same questions everybody's asking. Don't be obvious. Don't fangirl too much. So I'm going to try really hard not to fangirl in front of you. I've been following your career for a while now, and also because I'm kind of pivoting into horror film writing now. I really appreciate your originality. I appreciate your approach to things, but also I appreciate your subtle, or maybe not so subtle, call outs and shout outs in this movie specifically. I'm a huge fan of shapeshifter as a genre, but also female shapeshifter. So people, the original and the remake. I don't know how many remakes there were, but I remember the original and the remake. It was one of those movies that really caught me off guard, and I was like, wait a minute, I don't care about vampires and werewolves anymore. I'm all about shapeshifting, and so genre really affected me and like inspired me to kind of investigate that genre more. Also, I really love like how Alicia Silverstone. She's not like it's weird because people kind of pretend like, or not pretend, but they act like we own her, right? Because it's part of like nostalgia. And how dare she do something different? But I loved her in this because it's almost like a Catherine Deneuve, The Hunger feel, where she's like this older woman bringing in a younger woman into this world of shapeshifting, but also it's one of those movies that just sticks with you. And this character, particularly for her, I hope that this means that like she will continue on to do horror roles that are not typical, but in a way it's also kind of typical because this is teen girls. So like to have, the clueless star that is the icon for a lot of us and a lot of teens now, to have it be like now she's this quite different character. So I really appreciated that take. I really appreciated this movie a lot. Like I said, I've watched it multiple times, so each time I get something different. And I know you probably get like a lot of accolades with being compared to everyone from Cronenberg to David Lynch. I personally think also Joan Waters. There's a little justice in there with her. So I just wanted to say I really appreciated this movie, and I'm glad you're here to let us like fangirl a little, but also dissect the screen.
Oh my goodness. So thank you so much for joining us. My fellow co-hosts here are a lot more film savvy, I think, as far as like their knowledge than I am. I'm like the artsy porn star over here. Well, retired porn star going to graduate school, but I love this movie so much. It's not even funny. I hate to gush. I do. But at the same time, like I have to, because the first time I watched this, I was like, I stopped it a few times and like, I was like, what the heck is going on? Like, what am I watching? Like, it's just such a unique film. And there's so many, I feel like there's so many layers to it. And I gotta say, those teeth are the coolest fucking thing. They are just amazing. I always tend to analyze this stuff from like a feminist or a psychological perspective. And there's just so much of it. I think that the casting was amazing. Just like the aesthetic of it, like Renee said, is just, like, I watched it again, like literally I finished watching it a half an hour before we went on right now. So I've got all my little notes and everything. I always have my notes, but I can't find a thing wrong with it that I didn't like. And it was funny, after I watched it for the second time today, I was like, what do other people say about this film? Let me just see. So I went online, and it's like the only negative reviews are by men, really? And I was like, well, that's really telling. Like, but for the most part, like people seem to really love it. And I just want to say congratulations on making like a really badass film with amazing female characters and a lot of gore. I really like, all of us on the show, we really like blood. We like blood. We like menstrual connotations. We like all of that. So this is just really right up our alley, and we're so thrilled to have you on here.
Thanks to all of you, all three of you. I feel like we're like looking at this little quadrant. I feel like we're all like these brilliant brunettes. Like yay, yay for the like witchy brunettes. You know?
Yeah, the
Yay.
ones that are not wearing black.
I mean, welcome to our coven. You are.
I love it. I love it.
Yes, we have. You're definitely an honorary member. It's just amazing. But it's funny to segue into this film because the last podcast we did was actually Brandon Cronenberg and Infinity Pool, right?
Yeah.
So we were looking at the red liquid, and then we've come to you with the red kind of gunky glue. So we're kind of like, you know, it's a nice like sort of transition that we kind of put into this film. I've got to say, probably one of my favorite scenes in this film is towards the end when everyone is in the school hall and everyone's just screaming "fuck me."
Yeah.
Like that is such an amazing scene. Like I was just like, this is incredible. Like there's so many poignant bits in this where I was like, I wish that this film was made when I was a teenager. You know, like just I love the female like, you know, camaraderie and the empathy and like just the kind of banding together. But one of the things that really also struck me was, you know, the raids, you know, the like in the school. I was like, this is fun. I've never seen this done before. And I was like, really phenomenal, that like culture of fear. And you know, you put the lens on the females, you know, young females, and you don't see any of the male students doing
right.
You know, participating. It's the female students. And you know, I think that like struck a chord with me because it's like, you know, that kind of fear, that kind of environment is something that women are still dealing with today. And no matter what age you are, that's something that, you know, we're constantly, you know, have our own, what we've talked about a lot on this show, but, you know, women have their own little horror story, you know, we're always got this thing in the back of our mind. So that, I think those scenes to me really struck a chord because I felt like they were really just so strong, and the way that you filmed them, and even, you know, I mean, the principal and the cop are so heinous and so hateful. Like, you know, they're just these misogynist, disgusting men, you know, and then you've got like you know, all the men I think in this film are they're all quite gross, you know, and you've got the teenage boy who is, you know, this kind of, you know, Casanova type, you know, and then his dad is that, you know, ugh. And then of course the only male character essentially is, you know, Jean is the only sort of other character that's not completely, you know, bad. But you're, you know, at the beginning I was thinking, oh, you know, this is like the bad dad who's kind of let down the daughter, and, you know, I'm kind of, oh yeah, you know, and then of course, when we first see that scene when the shape shifting is happening, I'm like, ooh, here we go. Like, I love a movie that starts off slow and kind of little nuggets and then starts to kind of drop these bits everywhere. And just I think like the fascination with blood and transformation, like that scene where Alicia is, you know, got the cake and she's putting her finger in. I'm just like, ooh. And even like there's so many, like poignant scenes in this movie, which I encourage everyone to go out and watch it tonight. It's still on Shudder. Go and watch it. But there's so much of it. Like I felt like the women are very strong, and I think that the three main characters are very strong characters, and Alicia plays an incredibly stern, like, you know, wise kind of, you know, very, very like peculiar but amazing character. And the scene where she says, you know, this stuff, you know, is not yours, and, you know, and she says pick something and eat it. I was like, that was another scene. I was like, ooh. And I was watching that, and I've got to say I laughed because when she picked the lipstick, I was like, I would have picked the tiniest coin and just swallowed it. I was like, you go girl. She's like, I'm not hard. And I was like, whoa, you know. and yeah, there's this amalgamation of so many incredible scenes. And I know that you filmed this in Illinois, Chicago. Was it 2022? Yeah. And I know you mentioned quite a bit that it was a pretty miserable time to be shooting. Can you tell us a little bit about that, about the experience and what you went through?
Yeah. So, I mean, I had started writing this script in 2019 after the premiere of Knives and Skin, which is also a kind of like, a genre adjacent teen story.
Yes.
And I had set Perpetrator, which at that point was called A Girl and Other Small Stains. So it had a very different, more poetic title.
Yeah.
And I had set it in New Orleans, and then I had set it again in Savannah, Georgia. Both of those cities are notoriously kind of like haunted, cities in the US. And I had one and they both, those cities have a very particular kind of Southern Gothic architecture. Like I really wanted to make a kind of like Southern Gothic noir, where the architecture of the city was its own character. And, so then, we were thinking about shooting this in 2020. And of course, like, everything changed in 2020 for all of us. And including the kind of infrastructure around a film production in cities like New Orleans and Savannah. It's like they just became, cities that were not amenable to, shooting a film like this. So, the producers were saying like, well, where should we go next? We should find a state with a good tax credit. What about Utah? And I've shot a film in Utah before. And I said, absolutely not. I'm not shooting in Utah again. And also, I mean, not just because of the politics of Utah, but also the terrain of Utah. It was just like, was not quite right. And I said, it's like, well, Illinois has a really great tax credit. And wouldn't it be much more interesting if your director could sleep in her own bed at night? That could be interesting. So, and then, you play that game, which is like hurry up and wait, or wait and hurry up, or whatever those things are. So we got the kind of like full green light for spring of 2022 in Chicago, which it can be cold and snowy and rainy. And that's when we shot it. And so, Alicia Silverstone landed on set with no winter clothes. I mean, I know that she has, I love her dearly. I consider her a really good friend right now. And a part of me is kind of like, don't you at least have like a weather app on your phone? Couldn't you have at least like understood that, you might need like more than, a late, it's not LA, like March in Chicago is not LA, but we figured it out. It was fine. But at the same time, it made for some scenes that if I had written a scene where it rained all day in a cemetery, we couldn't have afforded it. And yet we shot a whole scene where it rained all day in the cemetery, and it was 100% miserable, super uncomfortable, and the footage is gorgeous. So,
that's usually how it works.
Yeah.
The more painful the position is when you're modeling, the more like excruciating the filming is. It usually turns out amazing.
Yeah, you have to suffer for your art, or you're not a real artist. So that's just part of the process, right?
Yeah.
But it did give like a gloomy kind of. I love that gloomy kind of, all the dark coloring and stuff that really worked well, and even like the muddy kind of ground walking. That all the terrain just looked gorgeous.
Yeah, and that was all entirely real. I think that some of my footwear has not didn't survive it, and also you know, if any of you have ever been to Chicago, Chicago has a very robust, for instance, like Ukrainian community. So the very first shot of the film is of the Evelyn character walking along a sidewalk, and you can see a Ukrainian flag in the background. And it was because we were shooting in Ukrainian Village when in March of 2022. You know, when the war was, you know, less than 2 months old or something like that. And not that this film takes that kind of political stance, but on some level, it felt really profound, you know, to make a film that is not necessarily supposed to be set in Chicago. And yet, if you're paying attention, you're like, oh, that's Ukrainian Village, you know, in Chicago. And, you know,
I mean, it kind of, though, it also makes a little bit of sense because some of the best teen films are based in Chicago.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. Hughes filmed all of his in Chicago. And
Yeah.
then, even though it's not Chicago, a lot of John Waters stuff is in Baltimore. Like, I feel like if this movie was shot in LA, it would be a totally different movie. And so the fact that you filmed it in Chicago, I think gives it an extra edge to it too. And also, I'm very familiar with Chicago, so I've been there many times. I was there very shortly for living, and it's one of those towns too that's because I'm from the Midwest, so I love anything that's a city that tries to be a city but in the Midwest where it's still the Midwest, if you know what I mean. Dude, you have with Midwest where you, like, I don't want to say kill them with kindness, but it's like it's a thing that you do as a Midwesterner that makes horror extra horrific. And I think that comes across in this movie. And I'm being presumptuous. I'm assuming you're from the Midwest, but
I grew up in Ohio, and then I ended up in Chicago for grad school. And I would say, just to back up for a moment, like I have never compared myself to David Cronenberg or David Lynch. But I do not mind those comparisons. I absolutely compare myself to John Waters, you know, so I'm super glad that you brought that up, because I do feel like my origins, you know, coming out of grad school, I made a whole series of kind of live action superhero kind of comic book called White Trash Girl that's on Vimeo still for free. And that absolutely came out of a kind of John Waters, you know, sensibility. And that kind of transgressive, you know, queer trash culture, whatever, you know, that I think or even Jack Smith, who's done Flaming Creatures, like all of that. And it's funny, like when Perpetrator premiered at Berlinale in February, I was asked to be part of a kind of a roundtable conversation through the Teddy Talks, which are kind of like, you know, a kind of a queer forum or whatever. And I talked about my connection more so to, like, you know, Jack Smith and John Waters and even a video artist named George Kuchar, and just, I was like, you know, the more I think about it, the more I feel like I'm a middle-aged gay man, like in the body of like a riot, like a third wave riot girl feminist or something like that, you know. And I don't
totally
know,
get that vibe.
right?
Yeah.
And I don't know who else is doing that, you know. And I think
I don't think anybody is, to be honest. And like looking back on, you know, a lot of the films you've done and the shorts you've done, I can totally see that whole like trash genre and like that mixing in. And I love John Waters, so I love, you know, like I love that you're like that we've got him in here somewhere, because we haven't done a John Waters on here because we sort of focus on horror, but like I love.
Well, we could still do Serial Mom because that is horror.
Yeah.
It's just a dark.
We could do, 100%. But like,
but I think that kind of sensibility. I think that when there are like critics who don't quite understand what I'm doing, I think they don't understand camp, like the history of camp.
Yeah.
For instance, they don't get, I don't know, like the power of satire or irony. You know, they don't understand also the power of like the abject, you know, I mean, just thinking about like going from kind of like divine, you know, like eating poop, you know,
For real.
Real poop as well.
right?
Like,
Real poop.
I mean,
such a
that's method acting to the nth degree, for
right?
sure.
To you know, to kind of like the ubiquitous, like the sort of like fountains of blood that exist in, I don't know, Perpetrator, for instance, you know, and how leaning into like the fallibility of like the body, and as an approach to like feminist theory, you know, just feels, you know, has always felt very productive to me, and very organic, you know. Like, it's funny when Perpetrator, you know, came out in February, like I said, at Berlinale, and even the initial press talked about all of the blood, I was like, what? I don't think there's that much blood in this film. Like, what are they talking about? Like, I didn't set out to make a really bloody film. I actually just set out to make a film where like there were bodies that were just kind of speaking for themselves, you know, which I do think that like for people who have uteruses, let's say, you know, we have a very robust and early relationship with like our bodies kind of betraying us, right? I mean, even though anybody could be like, well, I mean, can't you calculate it? Can't you kind of figure out when it's going to happen? No, absolutely not. Like at any moment, you have that thing where you're like, oh, fuck, I just started my period, you know, or whatever. And, you know,
Especially
or
teenager. I remember horror period stories from my teenage years. Of
Oh yeah, it was like, don't wear. I think that's one of the reasons I became goth, because I was like, at least it's all black clothing, so it's like neat or something. And also, I mean, I was thinking of the movie Carrie a little bit.
yeah, of course, 100%.
And also The Shining. Like, I used to tell people when they ask, "Oh, are you like?" Not that this would be a typical conversation piece topic, but whether or not I'm a heavy bleeder or not. But people would be like, you know, what do you describe your menstruation, whatever? And I'd be like, well, it's like the elevator in The Shining, where basically just blood just comes out for 2 weeks, and it's hardcore. It's not like this little tiny little. It's not like a Kotex or tampon commercial. Oh my god, I'm so old. I said Kotex. It's not like a Kotex. It's like an ad where it's just like this tiny little thing. And I love those ads too, because they were always like, oh my god, what if I bleed in the swimming pool? Like Jaws would come for you or something.
Yeah.
And so I like what, and I think maybe this is something that only you know, female filmmakers can really do, is really show the horrors, but also I guess sort of the magic, because there's blood magic, and there is menstruation blood is much more powerful than regular run-of-the-mill blood in witchcraft, and it's a thing that I think a lot of men don't touch ever. For reasons, and the fact that Stephen King wrote Carrie, it was his wife who really gave him the advice about the tampon scene, and about, you know, and I think because she was there, that was probably very helpful as a sensitivity reader. But also, it's something that I only think only humans that have uteruses that go through this understand it, because it is painful, it is scary. I had mine before my parents gave me the talk. So I thought I was possessed, because we were also a religious family. And I thought I was dying. I wrote a will in crayon. My little brother was like digging a grave in the back. I think he was trying to be helpful. But like I didn't know. And so when you present these types of themes in a film, where blood is magic, blood has power, blood means more than just the typical thing. That's why I love your movie so much, is because yeah, there's a lot of blood, but it's not for shock value. It means something. There's purpose to it. There is a reason it is there. And I think if people really look at your movie carefully and watch it as, you know, someone that wants to know more about this world that you've created, then they get more out of it. But I will agree with you. When I first was reading the reviews, I'm like, okay, who wrote this? And I was like, dude. Dude. And I'm like,
I literally went through them and I was like, are you kidding me? Like, this is like, and I mean, I will gush over this movie this entire show, but and it's the first one of your films or any of your work I've ever seen, actually. But I literally just randomly put it on TV one day, and I was like, because I was looking for something to like watch at night after class or something, or I don't even remember what it was, but I put it on, and I was just like, like I said, I had to pause it a few times because I was like, what the heck? What is like, and I'm one of those people, I'm sorry, I usually figure out every movie. I usually figure out where it's going. I can predict things. I can sometimes, my friends call me a little bit psychic because sometimes I'll predict a dialogue line before the person says it. And I'm like, how did you do that? But I had no idea where this was going. And that's one of my favorite things is when I find a movie that keeps me on my toes, keeps me guessing, but also has like, I mean, this movie had humor. It had like, there was parts that I was super creeped out. In fact, the second time I watched it, I was more creeped out than the first time. And it's got humor. It's got feminist stuff. It's got like the whole, I mean, I don't know how you came up with this. Okay. I was watching this like an hour and a half ago, and I stopped it and I said out loud to myself, how the heck did she come up with this stuff? Because like, I mean, it's really original, Jennifer. Like I watch a lot of horror movies. It's my favorite genre, and I've never seen anything like this. I mean, obviously, I haven't watched as much as Bonnie and Renee. They know ones that I've never even heard of, but it's my favorite genre. And this was just like, I mean, the whole empathy thing as somebody who's I'm earning my master's to be a therapist, and I'm going to be going to school to be a doctor of psychology. I'm going to be a psychologist, and I mean that whole angle. Just like I was like, as someone who feels so deeply and is so empathetic myself, just like really got me. And I was like, why? Like you watch horror movies and there's really not a lot of emotion in them. And this was like, it just had everything. I can't even tell you. And like, I'm sorry, but there's also incel vibes. Like, oh my God, he's such an incel.
Well, look, I mean, like this film really came out of, and I just like, oh my gosh, I love, thank you so much for, for the love. Because there's like a lot of like vitriol out there too, that I do not pay attention to. I just,
don't, because it's brilliant.
But, I mean, after Knives and Skin, and even the shorts that I made leading up to Knives and Skin, I was just getting a lot of questions from the press or from like Q&As about like, my experience working with teenage girls. Like people would say like, well, gosh, how is it, working with all those teenage girls? And I would say, oh gosh, it's great. That's why I keep doing it. And then I realized I had like the 12th, 13th, 14th time that I had been asked that question, I thought, oh, I actually think that the person asking this question, their assumption is that it's awful, that like their nightmare is to walk into a room where there's like 20, 14-year-old girls, and, I mean, and it just solidified what I knew already, probably as my own experience, having been a teenage girl myself at some point, that, we globally are a culture that is obsessed with youth and beauty among young women. And we also like really hate young women, like we really do everything that we can to, disrupt their evolution. And that goes even to adult women, like, so I thought, oh gosh, like, well, maybe there's something there, that I can do that could be an interesting follow-up to Knives and Skin. And I started thinking about, phrases that we use towards young women, teenage girls, especially who have like autonomy, over their sexuality, for instance. And, we might call a girl wild and out of control. And that phrase is never meant to, to kind of like celebrate her autonomy. It's really meant to diminish her autonomy, right? So I started thinking like, okay, well, what about if I write like a story about a girl who we meet and she seems wild and out of control, or she's called wild and out of control, and then she really becomes wild and out of control. And I thought like, oh, well, that's like a shapeshifter story, that's like a little werewolf story. But I knew that I didn't want for her to be a werewolf or a vampire. You know, I was like, I can do better than that. Or not, I mean, nothing, there's nothing against werewolves or vampires, you know? But I was like,
Yeah,
you know,
for those werewolves and vampires watching, we're not insulting you.
no, not at all. Or I was like, I can do something that feels more like allegorical. Maybe that's it. You know, like something that feels more metaphorical, allegorical. And and I was writing this in 2019, leading up to the 2020, presidential elections in the US. And I kept thinking about just the power of empathy. Like, oh my God, like there's so many people who just have no ability, literally have no ability to imagine what it might be like for someone else, And I think that we're still dealing with this, like right this very minute, globally, thinking about what's happening right now, and in Palestine, Israel, and just I don't know, like I feel all the time like how, I mean, I'm not an empath in a clairvoyant way, perhaps like Jenna is, but I do feel like I try as much as I can to sort of think like, well, what would that be like, And I know that there are a lot of people who either can't do that or won't do that. Anyway, so I was thinking like, well, what if you took like that sense of empath as it is related to a clairvoyancy or a paranormal, like, telepathy, and you took that to its like most extreme end, where someone could not just feel someone else's feelings, but actually like look like them, like what if that was your thing? And when I started, like, when my brain went to that, and I started thinking about the idea of like the overly emotional woman, and how that is, that the, emotions and emotional women, it's considered a real downfall, or like considered like the reason that like a woman would never be elected president of the United States versus absurd, right? I was like, oh, this is really, I was like, okay, this could be really great. And so there's some, Alicia has a great line. I mean, I wrote it, so I can't, she has this great line that she didn't come up with. I wrote it. But I appreciate, there's where she says, like emotional basket case can be a very, effective weapon or something like that.
Yes,
yes, it can.
And it just, and she got it. She, I mean, initial conversations with her, she totally got this script. There was not a moment, she's so smart, and she's so funny, and she's so professional.
I love hearing that.
Yeah. I mean, professional in the sense that like literally I could have given her an entire table of props and she would have known what to do with any of those. She knew exactly where her light was. She knew, I mean, she's just someone who has been in front of a camera since she was a teenager, and she did not have to take this film for the money by any means. She did not get paid much for this film.
Yeah.
And she was like, I think that you are an artist and I believe in art and I want to make this film with you. And I mean, it was a no-brainer. Like, it wasn't even, her team got the script and said, we'd like this for you. It's a weird script. They actually said to her, like, it's kind of like a Yorgos Lanthimos script, because she has a really great and memorable part in Killing of a Sacred Deer. So, right?
Yeah.
And so her team liked it for her and sent it to her. And I wrote her a letter, which I like to do for my actors, which I'm glad that Bonnie brought up The Hunger, because I literally cited Catherine Deneuve's character in The Hunger. I was like, okay,
cool.
I was like, I want to pattern you as Hildy after, Marion Blaylock. I really feel like
and I'm curious, had she never seen that? Because when I was watching it, I'm like, even her voice register was lower for this film. It was almost like Catherine Deneuve, sort of like, I'm not saying she copied her, but like,
no, she did.
Oh,
but not a bad way.
not in a bad way, in a very
No.
respectful way.
Yeah, no, she hadn't seen it. She had never seen it.
Okay.
So I said, okay, watch it immediately. But I also said, like, go rewatch Vertigo and Marnie. I was like, look at these like cool Hitchcockian blondes, with this like structured hair and these kind of accents that you kind of can't place, what I'm saying? It's like, and she was like, oh, I totally get it. So she landed on set, and Bonnie, you're not wrong. She absolutely lowered the register of her voice, because she still like sounds a lot like Cher and stuff.
Yeah.
Like,
but also, it was a totally, I wasn't used to her with that voice. And then I was like, okay, this isn't like a audio modulation type thing. This is her doing this on purpose.
Yeah.
Also, how she was speaking and the tone she was using and how she really pronounced every letter, every syllable. So it wasn't like, it didn't feel like casual conversation ever. So even when she's saying something in this film that any other actress would say it in a very like conversational tone, or maybe just a regular tone like this, she really thought it through. And you could tell that she was very careful of how she was speaking, and that gave her an otherworldly type of tone, because we're not used to seeing actresses today use that kind of dialect, or use that kind of very specific, personalized way of saying words. So I love that she did that. I'm so glad that you had her watch that stuff.
Yeah, and we really and we talked about that. I mean, and I think that, like, for people who don't like my films or don't get it, can't get into it, that's totally fine. And I would say, I direct my actors towards a kind of affectation. I direct my actors towards an affectation that might lean more into deadpan than anything else. Like, there's nothing more than I love about like giving actors a very, very melodramatic line of dialogue, and then like just like taking out all of the drama. And having them deliver it in a really deadpan way. And I think that sometimes for the undiscerning, viewer, that is seen as bad acting or bad directing. But for someone else, they're just like, oh my gosh, I totally get it. And that is a little bit about, that is about camp, or that is about the theatrics, or the kind of melodrama, or the artifice of it. I mean, I love noir films, and all that dialogue of those noir, of any, no matter what country noir is coming out of, especially when noir first began. Oh my gosh, all that dialogue is so stylized and so so stylized and so melodramatic, and I want nothing more than to kind of lean into the artifice of what cinema is, because I'm not trying to make something that feels, I'm not a like a social realism, filmmaker. I can't even do that.
Boring.
Like, no. Well, I mean, there's lots of films that I like to watch, like I love Kelly Reichardt as a filmmaker, who really does social realism so well. And it's like mathematics. I'm like, oh, I'm not good at that. Actually, I'm good at math, but I mean, I'm not good at social realism, but I am good at, or I think I'm good at, like, leaning into, this kind of like, deadpan melodrama, affect. And the actors who I bring on to projects, either get it or don't. And Alicia completely got it, and she had so much fun with it. I was like, okay, we're gonna like.
You could tell that she was
She loved it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
she was just amazing. Like, she was one of my first like teen girl crushes when I saw her in The Crush, actually.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my goodness.
The Babysitter.
Mhm.
That
Oh,
one.
I didn't
Oh,
see that when
you
she
gotta
was.
look that one up. It was the same time as
Oh.
the one, yeah.
Yeah.
No, The Crush was just
yeah,
like, oh, and that's when I just fell in love with her then, and I haven't seen her in anything in so long.
Mhm.
I think the last thing was probably the Sacred Deer one, and I
Yeah.
really forgot about that until you mentioned it. But it was just so great to see her in something that's like a larger role, and like it's also so great to, and people, I might get some hate for this, but it's also just so great to see like a woman aging gracefully and
Oh,
Yeah.
beautifully. Like
her evolution and
Mhm.
just like
she's
the
stunning. She's
so
stunning.
Oh, yeah.
presence is
Yeah.
striking. He commands attention.
Mhm.
Like I love the evolution of her. Like just seeing the way, you know, she's evolved and transformed as a woman
Mhm.
is incredible. And just like going back to delivering of the lines, like everything is just so poignant. Like short dialogue, as you said, melodramatic and very stylized, but so effective. Like I love the scene in the bathroom when she walks in after Johnny has, you know, bled on the rug, and you know, she says, I got blood on the rug," and I love Alicia's line where she's like, "Oh, it's tough, but you know, I can get it out," type thing. And I was like, "Yeah, you can." Like, I just love. You know, it's just like no biggie. Like I just love that, like, and just the way she just commands attention, you know. And I think the dialogue being the way it is in this film really made her character work. You know, it was what I was. Every time she came on screen, I was mesmerized by what is this woman's story? What is she? I just like felt like, oh, I could just grab at this character. Like
I know. I was just like, I hope there's a prequel. I mean, what you do on this show is to bully you into doing a prequel of this film because it was so good. And they just
No, I mean, I would love to do, because Alicia and I had a lot of conversations about, like, you know, she was like, "How old am I really?" And I was like, "I don't know, so old." You know, I mean, because that also came through. Like, there's something that's like
there's
so
the picture.
lovely,
Right?
where she, where we don't know how, right.
Yeah.
Right. And that partially came from a kind of a combination of going back to the Hunger and the Marion Blaylock character, where we understand that she's immortal. Like, she's had like lovers over centuries and centuries, which I just think is like so incredibly, you know, beautiful and heartbreaking, etc. Like, what is immortality incredible, or is it heartbreaking? Like, what if you really do have to bury all of your lovers in the attic? You know, I mean, it's just incredible. And then I was also thinking about you know, to bring up Stephen King again, you know, those moments in The Shining where there's like, through the photograph, we really understand that the Jack Nicholson character has been kind of transported. You know, he's always been the caretaker of that hotel. And so, you know, I didn't want to define how old she was or who she was or how she is, you know, but to give like hints at that. And Alicia really got that. And I would say, to kind of also double back to what you all were saying about just like who she is as a person. I mean, that's her real face. Those are her real teeth. I mean, she landed on set and and she's gorgeous. I mean, I think she just turned 47. She's a fully grown adult woman. She's got a child. She's got a full life, and
she's vegan.
And she's vegan, and she's vegan, and she's an incredible.
She was the very first to be out as vegan.
Yes, absolutely.
As a teenager,
yes,
which nobody was doing. But also, I like the fact that I think she's getting more beautiful as she ages. And I just spotted her in Reptile, which is
oh my god, Reptile's so good.
It's on my list. Well.
Yeah, it's a thriller that's on Netflix right now. Yeah. I don't know where it is in Australia, Renee.
It's on Netflix. Yeah,
Reptile is great.
And I went, ooh, straight away. Like, she's like a little red light. I'm like, Alicia, what are you doing now?
Look back at her history as an actor. She got so much like painful response trying to dip her toe into the DC Comics superhero world as Batgirl, and so many people were like, you know, and this is the beginning of fan rage before social media. So I couldn't even imagine what it would be like now. But like, the fact that she went to like a blockbuster film where she basically paved the way of a new teen genre, and then she dared to step into geek world. And I'm a big geek as well as a goth. So like I loved her in that movie. And the fact that they were like, no, you have to lose 30 pounds and you have to do this and that. And I was like, that's horrible that they did that to her. And it's a testament to her strength that she didn't just like flip everyone off and retire. Like she kept going, but like that is such horrible treatment towards female actresses. And again, it was, you know, the 90s, but I don't give that a pass. Like if honestly, this is why I'm not an actress and I'm a writer. I probably would have just burned the whole thing.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah, but she's a very, you know, she has a very strong will and a very strong stance, even against, you know, kind of Hollywood and sort of like aspects of Me Too. I mean, you know, she experienced all of that.
Oh yeah,
you know, and
I can't imagine.
Yeah, and so and I don't know, like working with her was just incredible. I consider her, you know, like a dear friend at this point. I want to cast her in all the weird roles, and I think that she was.
You want to see her?
I know, me too.
I think that she also, you know, like her against Kaya McKiernan, who plays Johnny, you know, who you know, Kaya has more like had more theater experience, you know, than film and TV experience. And so I think the two of them together were, you know, a really interesting combination. And then, you know, when we decided to shoot this back in Chicago, I mean, oh my gosh, the Chicago theater community is just like bonkers, you know? So for instance, like the woman who plays the school nurse with all of her facial bandages and whatnot, she's currently the creative co-director of the Steppenwolf Theater, which is like lauded, you know, founded by, you know, Gary Sinise and John Malkovich. And she's this incredibly well-respected, like one of the most respected dramatic actors, you know, theater actors in the US, really. And this is the third film that I've done with her, and I just make her look more ridiculous every time that I bring her on board. But you know, her performance is like so good and so subtle, and Christopher Lowell, who plays our kind of villain, you know, who has a really memorable, you know, he's the groom at the end of Promising Young Woman, which there's some interesting kind of like meta, you know, like meta-ness in that. And, you know, when I talked to Chris about when he got the script and I thought I was like, okay, he could be a really interesting villain, because I wanted my villain to be kind of charming and handsome in a kind of Patrick Bateman sort of way, you know? And I got on the phone with him and he was like, who are you, Jennifer Reeder? You're like a real weirdo. And I was like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I just want you to make this film with me. And he was like, oh, I'm going to make this film with you. You know, like it was, I don't know, like at the end of the day, everyone who said yes, and everybody said yes. And I have to tell you that, like, I can't say who, but there were so many people, because I started writing this in 2019. The cast like changed a bunch, and there were the most enviable people attached at different points. Like I never had to talk anybody into making this film, you know, like as weird as this script is, I realized like, oh, actors want to get weird.
Yeah.
You know?
We do.
Right. Even like, you know, gorgeous Jenna, like you're like, let's get weird, you know, like
let's get bloody. One of my favorite things I ever did was I had one little cameo in a horror movie, and I got to be drenched in blood. And at the end of it, because I played like an escaped cult leader in this really it wasn't a great movie, but I was covered in blood, and they carved like satanic symbols into me, like. And at the end of it, I was in that for like 14 hours or something, and then they're like, do you want to wash this off before you go home? And I was like, no. And I made sure that I stopped like 2 places on my way home. I went and got gas because I was hoping somebody would be like, oh my God. And of course it's LA. Nobody even gave a damn.
Yeah,
like,
I was gonna say.
I got no attention, but I could not stop taking pictures of me like that. And then when I went in the shower to wash it all off, I was like, this is so cool. And then I was like, I'm so weird.
No, it's not so much weirdness. I think it's also just like, you know, like there's the reason that I personally as a storyteller have like leaned into genre storytelling or even genre adjacent storytelling, because I think there's lots of genre press who are kind of like, well, she's not really making a horror film. It doesn't matter. Is that I do feel like in like the genre world is where I can lean into the surreal. I can lean into the allegorical. I can lean into the metaphorical. I can make my weird deadpan dialogue moves. I can lean into what I think is one of the strongest parts of my filmmaking, which is like visual storytelling, you know, all of this kind of stuff. And I can really lean into the artifice of filmmaking where hair and makeup and wardrobe are narrative content. You know, nothing is arbitrary. You know, it's just like you are making art, really. And I didn't go to film school. I mean, I made films and arts in art school. Like I mean, as an undergrad and a grad student, I went to art school. I mean, literally it was like I was an art student at Ohio State University. And then I was an art student at the School of the Art Institute. I made films, only films in both of those situations, but those were not film schools. And like, I literally was like, at the end of my senior year as a BFA candidate at Ohio State, you know, having to take sculpture 2 again or something like that. And just being convinced my sculpture teacher, like, look, I can't make sculptures. But I will make you 5 films this semester. And she was like, oh, fine. I was like, I'm a graduating senior. I was like, I'm a graduating senior. Like and I've already got into grad school, you know, like I will make you the best, you know. And so I didn't go to film school.
I'm assuming that's regular film, not digital, because when I was in film school, there was no digital yet. So like,
no, not at all. Yeah, we're talking about like Super 8 films,
yeah,
16 mil.
Yeah, credit cards.
Oh, that's
just
awesome.
to like make our students film, or we would work at a film cutting place and take the scraps that were thrown out and record over them. Which is what John Waters did, I think, with his first film. So it's not a cheap.
I love that. Like coming from an art background, I love that with a lot of directors where they've, you know, coming from a completely different, you know, place, but it actually, I feel like it almost pulls the best out of you. Like I went to an art school as well, and I did like a lot of like photography, but I fucked with it. Like I fucked with it a lot. So like all the other students in school were like, I do not get you at all. Like, I might like get up and, you know, like be presenting like this is my big project for this semester or whatever, and they'd all be like, I don't get this, like, you know, and they're all doing like artsy fartsy like you know, portrait photography or landscape, and I'm like, you know, one of the things I did even when I was in high school was like I worked at like a supermarket, right? And I was like, again, blood and whatnot, and I was like, I want to take foul, disgusting photos of like what happens behind the scenes in the butcher department, right? What you can see, like, because I used to run into the fridge, right, and run out in like split seconds because I found it so gross, right? And I was like, you know, I'd watch people come through and buy, and this is, you know, I get not even I'm a vegetarian, but you know, it's not like necessarily a vegan message.
Sorry, did you see my face, Renee? I'm sorry.
Oh no, it's disgusting. Like, this is why I did it, right? So I got like went and took photos, right, of all the really foul things that happen behind the scenes that people don't see when they buy their meat, like packaged. And so I did that, and then I got all the styrofoam containers and I packaged all my photography in meat trays with cling film and like with pricing and all sorts of stuff. And you know, and I was like, and then presented it, and people were just disgusted. And I was like, but you all eat meat, you know. But I was trying to say like there's these under layers of things, and I think that's what I really loved about coming from that background, and I wasn't intending to fuck with film originally. And then, you know, I had an amazing mentor who's actually a very much camp John Waters filmmaker, and I've starred in a couple of his short films, just playing crazy female characters that he's created. And he actually referred me to this art school, and he was teaching a film class, and so I joined. He wanted me in the film class, and so I joined. And I ended up getting a film which everyone didn't understand, and it was played at like here in the Australian Centre of Moving Image, and it was on at the same time as they were doing a panel talk for Clockwork Orange, and I was just like, this is so cool. And you know, but I was watching all these like fluffy films and like just bad student films, and then mine came up, and people were just, what is going on? And I was like, that's when I knew I was a weirdo, because I was like, everything that I'm doing, there's only a very small proportion. And like all my teachers at school loved that film. They all loved the crazy shit I did with my photos and stuff. And I ended up winning like a massive award for my photography, which was good. But that art background, I think, really set me up for doing that, because it's like you see all the like the metaphorical, like you said, and these layers, and you're able to kind of pull all these resources together to make, you know, just a piece of art. And that's what I love about film, is like there's film, there's movies. I usually say there's film, there's movies, and then there's art, you know. And I feel like that's the difference between a good film and a bad film, or a memorable film and a non-memorable film.
Well, sure. And I think that for me, you know, it's like I think of acting as it is related to like performance art, you know, or you know, the like I said, you know, just the importance of you know, color theory and like texture. And I don't need to make a film that feels like it's grounded in someone's knowable reality. Like I actually really want an audience to you know, sink into the world of one of my films, and they're like, oh, this is its own little, you know, world. And and honestly, I also just can't help it. Like I don't, even for Perpetrator, you know, I thought like, okay, I've made a bunch of weird moves in my shorts and in Knives and Skin and whatnot. So I'm going to just like make something that feels like it's really commercial, you know, like why not? Let's just try it. And so the funny thing, like when I was reading initial reviews, you know, even like the great ones that are like from convention, like, you know, Deadline or Hollywood Reporter or whatever, and they were like, this might be the weirdest film she's ever made. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. You know, like and I don't, that's fine. You know, like I have a whole, you know, I have an agent and a manager and a lawyer. Like I have a whole sort of team behind me of like, you know, people who are champions of the moves that I want to make. And I do not take that for granted, because I think that it's still a very, very hard road for you know, people making films who are not like white, straight, cis het men, able-bodied. We go on and on, you know, like I think that it's still like that.
The mythical norm.
Right. The system is still, you know, rigged to benefit them. So if you are not them, it's still actually a kind of like uphill, you know, with no shoes on, you know, through the snow, blah, blah, blah. And so why not just carve out your own path? You know, like I'm always astonished by, you know, filmmakers who are much younger than I am, who are, you know, trans, queer, you know, of color, et cetera, who are like wanting to kind of replicate a sort of Tarantino vibe or something. And, you know, fuck Tarantino all day long. But I mean,
well, and also Tarantino also was doing other directors' vibes. So it's not like he came to the box original.
Right.
He was also paying homage to a lot of very like, unless you went to film school or unless you worked at a video rental store like he did, you weren't involved in all of that like the main, I'm just gonna just butt in here and say real quick, I think people calling us weirdos is a compliment. Because
Yeah, for sure. I embrace it.
And also with your movies specifically, because horror film, I think, is a perfect genre for women, queer, like everyone that's kind of like been butted out of the mainstream system. It gives them a place to be original, to be interesting. It doesn't take a lot of money to make a horror film look great. And also it doesn't take a lot of money for it to become a cult classic or become a hit. And I think that's why a lot of us, I know that's why I gravitate towards horror. I mean, I worked for
such a welcoming community, and we've talked about it before.
It's a welcoming community, but it's also very indie. Like I worked at Lucasfilm for 10 years, which is sci-fi and adventure. There's no horror in there. I mean, there's a little bits and pieces, but it's not a horror studio. And I feel like studios that are now really doubling down on horror and really focusing it 100%, whether it's Blumhouse or A24 or Neon or all the independents that are out there, I think they're finally figuring out that horror has this DIY punk rock spirit to it that a lot of female people that present as female, and like I said, the queer community really grab onto, because with horror you can tell very deep, interesting stories, but you don't have to dumb it down. Right. And you do have to dumb it down for mainstream if you want mainstream audiences or cis white male reviewers to love your film. You have to dumb it down, and I love that you're like
Roger Eggers of the world.
I love that you were like, I tried to make a mainstream film and this was it, but like, and I know
it's funny. It's like I just can't even.
Well, no, I love that.
Like I'm not capable, and that's completely fine.
That's why we love you.
I love you, because like
I said, this is a step up.
Even David Lynch said like Twin Peaks was his mainstream, like a soap opera, and we're like, that's not mainstream, but to him it's mainstream. So that's why I think so many people love him, because he doesn't think his stuff is weird. I think you fail as a creator when you try too hard to make your film weird or unusual or hit a certain group. Yeah. If you just be yourself, you're going to get the audience you deserve, and you deserve a great audience for this film, because it is something I have never seen before, and I watch everything.
Yeah,
she really does.
I feel
weirdness flow, everybody.
No, and I feel really thankful. I feel really thankful at the end of the day that this, like, that Shudder came in to finance this film, and I had made two other projects previously with Shudder, which is not a given for them to come in, but I love that Emily and Sam and Nick. At the end of the day, Shudder is the three people that I know of, even though like AMC is the kind of like, and even dealing with AMC, it doesn't feel like a giant ogre corporation, like I feel like I've been very protected and very trusted, and so having a studio like Shudder come in and say, we trust you, we want to make this film with you, and we believe in this film, and I mean, this is the fourth film I've had that premiered at the Berlin Film Festival, which is also not a film festival that has necessarily embraced genre. I mean, it's a very serious European film festival, and
that says a lot though, Jennifer, that like that, I even just progressing with genre films, that now I love that, we've come into this kind of time where genre films and, specifically horror films are now being taken seriously.
Yes, absolutely. No, and I think, I mean, if we look at like, that Titan, won an award at Cannes, or I mean, Bones and All premiered at Venice, whether you like that film or not, like whatever. Like, I just think that like that it is, that genre films are being taken very seriously, and that, I don't know, like I honestly, I feel like this, I couldn't be more happy with the reception of this film, and that people are loving Alicia's performance. And I think that Kaya is such a little superstar, and I want her to get like, all the best roles from here, and it was really great.
Was she in Mary of Kingstown? Like, I feel like I've seen.
Yeah, she was in Mare of Easttown.
Yeah, like she did a great job in that. So I'm
Yeah,
glad
she did a
that you
great job.
took her out and put her in your movie, because you're right. She's gonna go on to do great things. She's a great actress.
Well, and very coincidentally, so she was also in an Amazon show that did not get renewed, but an Amazon show called Night Sky that Sissy Spacek is in.
Oh yeah.
And so in the scenes where Kaya towards the end, when she's like freed herself from the perpetrator's lair and she's like just covered in blood, she told me that she sent a picture of herself to Sissy, like texted Sissy, and
The original
series. exactly. And that Sissy just said like looks sticky or something like that, you know. And I was like, well, she would know. I mean, I was like,
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I was like, oh my God, like
That's an amazing like 360 like
I know. Yeah. And I had told, I mean, it was I had told Kaya, I was like, okay, watch Carrie, you know, like watch Jennifer's Body, you know, also watch The Hunger. I mean, watch Cat People. I mean, there were some
good ones.
serious references that I had given to her as well. But I love that somehow, that Sissy, that the original Carrie, the Queen was brought in there too. So
yeah. I wanted to dial back on what you said earlier about the first title that you had. And the stains. Something that like really stood out to me in the film was primarily, I guess, throughout most of the film until the end, you see that in the room there's the mattress with the huge stain, and it's very poignant in a lot of shots. And I'm obviously making the assumption that was very much, you know, deliberate. And yeah, I love that. And then towards the end, there was a transition where I was like, oh, now she's got blankets and stuff. And I love that starkness and sort of that. And like, I guess I wanted to say, like, talking to you know, now that you've mentioned the title and the stains, it's kind of like now connecting. I'm like, whoa. But yeah, like that was like all the scenes with the mattress really stuck out to me, because I was like, I've never slept on a mattress with no sheet. Like in my life, you know, and especially there's this giant blood stain. It's just like no one said anything about it. Like, you know, it's just it is what it is. Yes. And then later when the mother is sitting on the bed and then she talks about how she was in that house and then the blood, and I'm like, you know, it was really amazing. And then something that it triggered in my brain when you were saying earlier about the John Waters references as well, the scene with the nurse and she's like getting head in the school, that scene
He's terrible.
terrible. But like when she's, you know, she's got the stuff on and that scene really like was like, oh, this is really like really John Water trashy, like, and it was giving me those vibes. And especially how he's just like, shut up. And I was like totally those vibes. I was just like loving it. But one thing as well, I think we haven't sort of touched on yet is the in this film as well, there's that like the underlying theme about youth and also trying to maintain youthfulness. You know, the, you know, the nurse, the principal, you know, the cop, like everybody's talking about these procedures that they're having. And there's this big focus on like, you know, don't, you know, even when he yells at the nurse and he's like, don't, you know, you're going to muck up, you know, and I had this
I didn't talk for 6 weeks.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and there's this like super preoccupation with the adults in this film, minus Alicia, who's completely embraced herself. But the other characters are completely fixated on trying to maintain their youth. And then obviously as the story evolves, we see, you know, the killer is taking parts. And where are these parts going? And then it's like, oh, right. So we're not talking about plastic surgery here. We're talking about, you know, what is this? So I love that is the subtlety of like, are we talking about plastic surgery? Or, you know, are these like parts of humans that they're taking from young, beautiful girls, harvesting to then make themselves like better? And even there was a line by I can't remember which character it was, but where she talks about the eyes. And everyone has loved her eyes.
Everyone wanted her eyes.
Yeah. And I love that. It's like also the, you know, the obsession and fascination with youthfulness and young females. And, you know, there's always been that aesthetic around young females where, you know, there's this angelic beautifulness, but like, you know, wanting to grasp onto that and keep it. And I love the way you explored that in this film. And
Jenna's been dying to say something. Go, Jenna.
I love like the juxtaposition of like Alicia and how like she's just aged so beautifully and she's so powerful and so badass. And then you have these like scuzzy, like, I don't want to say scuzzy, but you have these like vapid people who are like so obsessed with the looks. And I just love the contrast of that. Like it's just so impactful in my opinion. But I have to ask, and this is what I have to ask, the buttholes.
Yeah.
I have to go there. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the first time I saw it, I was like, that's a butthole.
Yeah.
That's a butthole. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I was like, how the heck did she like it's just so original and so bizarre and so cool all at the same time.
Well, I wanted, so all of these things are right. Like I really was thinking about, I mean, part of all this came from both, you know, like scrolling through Instagram and, you know, looking at ads for, I don't know, like powdered placenta or whatever, you know, like just things that like, you know, and then I was listening to, you know, like an NPR story about parents of boys who didn't think their boys were big enough when they were 14. And so they were like trying to track down like synthetic human growth hormone to get their boys bigger because the doctors were like, I'm not going to give you organic human growth hormone. Like your kids they're going to be as tall as they are or whatever. Like just all of that sort of, like the combination of those things, or taking this idea of someone saying to somebody else, like, wow, I love your hair. I wish I had your hair. And taking that to a really extreme degree. Like, well, what if you could have that woman's hair? Like you could just decide to scalp that woman and then you would have her hair or whatever, you know, like
my butthole.
or somebody's butthole, right?
I do have a fleshlight toy that is my answer.
Right. So I knew that when like I knew that when the girls would have, or that the perpetrator would have like these kind of weird ports, you know, which I also, you know, those kind of ports that also for chemotherapy or whatever are like, you know, those really exist and those are much more plastic and, but I was like, okay, well, they have to have these kind of ports so that like maybe hormones or fats or whatever can kind of be transformed or transferred rather. But I want him to feel really gross and organic. And so
gross, I was going to say, Jennifer, I loved it because it was so gross. I was like, when the little mask is coming off and when we're first seeing the killer, and I was like, what is he doing? I was just like, what's he gonna do? What's he gonna do? You know, and then it's like, oh, he's got like a butthole USB port and he's gonna like
exactly, yeah. Which also feels a very, very kind of like Cronenberg's Existenz or something like that.
Yes.
There's that, you know, that kind of
the scene with the back and
yes, that kind of like body horror stuff, you know, it's all related. And so then so there's a really great like makeup effects company who's here in Chicago, and the person who's in charge of that, this guy Anthony Cozart, who's just so brilliant, and he's a very quiet, unassuming guy who deals in making whatever you want, a charred body, a severed head, whatever. So I was like, okay, Anthony, we need to have these kind of sort of sewn on ports. And I said, I want the outer ports to look like buttholes. And then I want the inner ports to look like labia. Like I want them to be really vaginal, you know? So, and again, not to necessarily be like binary, but I was like, I want that to be the case, so that like the port ripped off, and then it's like I don't know. And so he was like, okay, like really quietly, just like, all right, no problem. And then he would send me photographs of, and like sketches of like 12 different kinds of like buttholes and 12 different kinds of like labial other ports or whatever.
He's one of us. One of us.
Yeah. And what I loved about when the New York Times review came out, which was lovely, it called it an angry anus. So I was like, oh my God, has the term angry anus ever been published in the New York Times ever? Never. I inspired that.
You have that like framed and put on your wall somewhere.
Yeah, right.
New York Times angry anus.
Yeah. So no, you're not wrong. I mean, there's just like that kind of level of thinking about bodies and body parts, and if there was indeed some awful guy who was kind of chopping up girls to send parts of them out into the world, like of course they there might be like repurposed buttholes or whatever. And I know that I mean, look, I am a 100% card carrying feminist. I do not condone violence against women, obviously. I mean,
you're on the right panel, Jenna.
But I do think that there have been some people who have come after me, and some women who have said like these like you're like you're not a good feminist, because you've or like Knives and Skin, at the base of Knives and Skin, or like the primary character, like the main character of Knives and Skin is a dead girl, and this and Perpetrator has a lot to do with sort of missing girls and violence against girls, and Evelyn of course goes missing and ends up scalped and without her teeth and whatnot. And yet the thing is, like, I stand by all of that because I acknowledge that in real life, not in films, in real life, women go missing every day and are never looked for, especially women of color and indigenous women, right?
Yeah, that's what I
And trans women, I mean, and I can speak for myself, but I have been, in my life as a younger woman, I had to flee in the middle of the night, a domestic violence, relationship. I mean, it's like, I have been sexually assaulted, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's like not a blah, 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 but I mean, my God, it's like, if there is a woman standing in front of you, she has,
100%.
so, like she has encountered violence based on her gender.
100%.
And so, and so I'm always kind of astonished at people who are more offended by like fictional portrayals of violence, especially ones that are so like hyperbolic like mine, rather than just saying kind of like, oh, how about we sort of like do better with like in real life, I'm dealing with like violence against women.
Well, also I think sometimes people throw around the word feminist, and again, there are many waves of feminism. I mean, I came out with a craft book when Trump and Hillary Clinton were, battling it out for the presidency, and it was called Crafting with Feminism. And it literally was a craft book. And I know I have some suggestive things in there, like I have vagina-shaped tree ornaments for Christmas, and I have like a huggable uterus that's got a little pad in it you can put a heating pad in it for your cramps. So there's stuff, and tampon dolls where you make little dolls out of tampons. But like, I got so much hate, not only from like, the typical incel types that are always going to do a word search on feminism and Amazon and then give it all bad reviews whether they bought the book or not. But then there's this gatekeeping that happens.
Yeah.
Women, and I know as a creator myself, I know as a feminist myself, and I use that word with pride and joy. I do not use it as like a loaded weapon. I use it as you can be, all different types of people can be feminists, but there's something about the weird gatekeeping that goes on with that title, with that moniker, with women against women, which is very frustrating. And it's also kind of weird too, because I think, in this world we live in right now, where you would think more women would support other women filmmakers, that's not always the case. And there are women of power at studios that could really turn the tide quickly if they actually did what they said, which is hire female screenwriters, female directors, female assistant directors, female cinematographers, like female editors, and actually mean it. Because I always get frustrated when studio heads who are also women say there's just not enough in the genre films or sci-fi, fantasy, horror, which is bullshit. Because I live in LA and I live in North Hollywood, not even the good part. And if you throw a rock at just randomly throw a rock in Republic of Pie, which is a great cafe where a lot of screenwriters hang out, you would probably hit 5 or 6 female screenwriters willing to do stuff, but also who are very talented. And that's why I'm glad we do this show, because we do feature a lot of female, not just female-centric horror, but female writers, directors, actors that really smile. And it's because of female. So. Yeah, but it's also the people that say this movie isn't feminist, I don't think they're really looking, because when you look at horror, there's a horror from all the way back to the 50s with the movie The Brain, where a woman who is elderly wants her brain transferred into a younger body and has her husband go and kidnap young women that could possibly be her transplant. And the whole idea of youth and horror has been there since Elizabeth Bathory, who was a and
I think that when I actually just feel like I want to lean into the tropes, the problematic tropes of so many genre films, and not just ignore it.
I love that you said that. I love that you said that, because one of the things I wrote down was this is a really brilliant, unique take on the missing girl.
Exactly.
Trope. It's so original. And that's there's so, I don't understand how anyone could call this not feminist either, because I'm
getting angry.
So many
there's a whole discourse within the feminist community that's so combative.
Well, and then in this movie, there's also a discussion of class, if you want to look at it.
Yes.
Because she's stealing stuff to help her father, which is really her mother. But I gave it away. There's discussion of the coat hanger for abortion.
Right.
There's so much in this to discuss, and I think there's so many underlying messages. And as someone who has studied gender and women's studies, and that's one of the reasons I love this film so much, because anyone can make a gory, scary horror film, anyone can make that, I feel like. But to make something that is creepy, funny, artistically beautiful, and then also has all this underlying stuff, just makes my head go.
Also the sweetness of the queer relationship that's happening between the two girls.
I love that. I love that they were women of color. I just loved it, and they weren't the typical body types or anything. I just loved that, because you don't see that enough. A lot of times when people put roles and there's a queer scene or something, it's always somebody it's always for the male gaze. It's always for
right. Yeah.
That so wasn't, and it was so. As somebody who's bisexual, it was just
right. And I think and I think that it also was meaningful, to me, to sort of make Johnny's own kind of sexuality be really unknowable, and that she's going to make out with whoever she wants to make out with, and her relationship with Elektra, maybe they hooked up, and maybe they're girlfriends, or maybe they maybe they just hooked up, and that's fine, and she can still make out with Kirk and tease him about the girls that he wants to date. And I wanted to also make his character
emotional,
and it also felt really good when I realized that I could kind of make this this hunky, whatever, jockey, cute kid be also someone who's just oh my God, girls are the best. I just love girls so much. And he doesn't and he's just he's under their spell. It's not the other way around,
100%.
And that actor, Sasha, was kind of is that same person, like was just like, everything was a miracle to him. He's just like, and he's literally like like 6'4", like just towered over me. It was always just like, oh my God, Jennifer, like how lucky am I today? He was just like such a sweet kid. And speaking of that, and maybe just because it's 11:30 where I am, maybe we could wrap up pretty soon.
Yes.
But I was gonna say, like, Bonnie, what you're talking about is in terms of just like the infrastructure. I wanted to give a shout out to Sebdia Castrati, who was the cinematographer for this film, who is this incredible woman. She's based in LA now, but is from Kosovo. I mean, she's like the only professional cinematographer out of the entire country of Kosovo. She started. She was studying to be a nurse when the war broke out in Kosovo. Wow. and then bought a camera to start documenting what was happening in the war. And then fast forward to, she applied eventually to be a cinematographer at AFI, got into AFI, and now is a professional cinematographer. And so, and I had, our first AD was this amazing Puerto Rican woman. Our camera department were all women. I mean, I really want to put my money where my mouth is, so to say, so it's not just about like casting in front of the cameras, like I want to be able to sort of like, be like cut and like look up, and it's like, like everybody who should be there, like helping. It's like women, people of color, trans folks, queer folks, like I just think that we still live in a world where like everybody who's not that still has such an easy path to wherever the fuck they want to get to, that I'm just kind of like, in my point in my life, and I didn't have mentors when I was a young filmmaker. I was just like coming out of, like I said before, like third wave riot girl feminism, which was like completely DIY. It's like the kind of filmmaking parallel to sort of like Bikini Kill and that whole kind of, Kathleen Hanna's sort of track. Yeah. And we did not have mentors, you're just kind of like, figure it out by your fucking self. And I did that. And I think that I have gotten to where I am right now as a filmmaker because I kicked in the basement window, not because, and like, then I kind of like sneaked in through the house, and like hid for a little while and, like pretended to be somebody else. And then I eventually ended up in like the living room of the house with all the bros. And they were like, how the fuck did she get here? Who's this, But I am at a place where now I can kind of like stand on the front porch, so to say, and, like invite other, filmmakers to kind of come into the house. And I have lent myself to other films as a producer or a creative producer, but only like right now I'm a creative producer on a really amazing film that's being made by this great trans man about like tendencies for trans men after transitioning to get into relationships with like cis gay men. And, through my mentorship with the Indigenous program at Sundance, I also was a creative producer on a great film about an Indigenous dominatrix called the, Daily Life of Mistress Red. Mistress Red. So like, I really feel like I am now trying to kind of like use my evil, for good. But only with filmmakers and with projects who I just feel like are still at the margins, where they're trying to kind of convince somebody like, I can do what I say that can do. And I just say like, all right, I believe that, because I still feel like oftentimes, even with the success of any of the films that I've done, I still feel like I'm starting over, where I'm kind of like, hold on a second. I've had films at Sundance, Berlin, South by, Tribeca. Like, why? Like everything, I'm 100% gonna do what I say I can do. And they're like, yeah, well, I don't know. like that trust gap still exists, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%.
And
Imposter syndrome.
right, exactly, right.
So yeah.
Yeah. So with Perpetrator, yeah, there was like just, you know, behind the camera was also as authentic and awesome. So I wanted to give a shout out to like what was happening behind the camera too.
Thank you so much for your passion in doing that, because I feel like that's something, you know, we're not seeing, and I love that that's something that you are like actively, you know, trying to action, because I feel like not enough people are, you know, and I feel like like you said, the traditional route is still, you know, dominating, and we're missing out on so much amazing art and so much creativity by cutting these margins out. And it's, you know, it's not reflective of the world we're living in. You know, so it's time that, you know, it's really time that this is stuff that needs to be championed. And if other women aren't going to do it, then we are.
Yeah.
So you know, that's really how I view it. It's like, well, then
And thank you for that. And also thank you for being on our show, because I mean, we're not Hollywood Reporter or Variety Deadline, but like I do feel like a lot of women would, and also not just women, everybody that wants to like do their own story in horror, do their own story in a genre, but not have to go like the typical route everyone thinks they have to go through. I think it's, and also you can still get big stars if the story's there, if it's an interesting enough take. And you also, with the extra mile, to write a letter to the right. Not a lot of directors and screenwriters would do that for their leading ladies or for their, you know, major actors that they want. So I just want to say thank you for coming on our show and igniting more inspiration in us and hopefully in our viewers to do something creative and not wait and get permission. You know, just do it, but also tell your own story.
Exactly. You know, I think that at the end of the day, honestly, if you are a writer, a director, just a storyteller in general, if you are not being, you know, true to yourself and being authentic, then what's the point? And it's at the same time, like I know there's lots of, you know, content in the world, so much content in the world that probably at the end of the day is comes out of some kind of algorithm. Like this is what people want, you know? But, you know, like I go to bed at night and wake up in the morning, you know, only with the idea of being authentic, you know, to myself and understanding that I like my audience finds me and vice versa. And, you know, these conversations with like you three brilliant, you know, humans is also, you know, also just feels like, you know, entirely meaningful and part of that trajectory of authenticity and, you know, telling our truths and being funny and fallible and weird and you know, all that good stuff. And no shade for the blondes, but yeah, let's like shout out to the power of the brunette, you know.
To all the Wednesday Addams and vampires of the world and Elvira's, I think we represent well. So
no, but I mean, it was like a while ago. It was like a month ago, maybe even longer, that, you know, you, Renee, had like reached out to me and with such enthusiasm, and I say no to a lot of things because I just feel, you know, I want to try to optimize my time, and I didn't say this other part of my life, which is real, which is that I'm the mother of three very boy presenting boys. One of who had a football game tonight. You know, it's like a very funny thing that I pivot my dogged feminist life away from, like, to sort of be to cheer on a football player, which feels like
you can still be a feminist and enjoy football.
100%. And I feel like he's such you know, he and I spent a long time this afternoon prior to him going to his game talking about, you know, Palestine and Israel. Like, he's a really, really smart, globally engaged young man who also happens to be a good tackler. I don't know, like, and right now it's like breast cancer awareness month, so he was all decked out in hot pink, also.
Aw.
I don't know. There's all sorts of ways that being the mother of three very boy presenting moms that has I don't know, that influences all of that. So anyway, but I say no to a lot of things because I just have to compartmentalize and sort of be mindful of my time and know like what I'm willing to kind of come to and be authentic and be real and open. And I mean, this was a no-brainer. So I really appreciate this conversation. Let's like keep it up. Let's do it. Just do it again. I'll make another film, if only so I can come back and talk to you three. How's that?
No, we will be stalking you online, but also we will be inviting you every time you do something. So just know that that's going to happen.
Yes,
So,
yes.
Once someone comes on, it's once that you're on once, you're already a Coven member.
already part of
We're having the Addams family on coming next month.
Oh, I love them so much.
This will be the second time. So yeah, we just keep coming. So we'll be.
I did get my nails done earlier this week.
I saw. I was say they look amazing.
Like proper bloody, look like bloody.
For Friday the 13th.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, Friday the 13th. My God, it's like this is the perfection.
Yeah, it was kismet. It was supposed to happen. So
absolutely.
First.
And I think before we go, I only had one other comment I just wanted to say was I love that you, like, as somebody who's obsessed with psychology, I love that you included the mirror neuron stuff. Like that was so up my alley. And I this is totally random, but the blood on the fishnets shot, like I'm obsessed with that shot. Like I'm obsessed with it. I don't know why, but I just love it. But yeah, this has been an incredible night. I can't stop smiling. My cheeks hurt. And I cannot wait to see what else you create. And now I'm going to go back and watch all the other stuff that I haven't seen. And plus you also have the best name ever. I just happen to also,
Yeah, exactly.
This is the best name, but yeah. So thank you so much because this was awesome, and it's not often that I get to watch a movie that I love so much, and I get to ask like questions about it personally. So,
Jenna, Renee, Bonnie, I mean, the love and respect is entirely mutual. So thank you so much.
I'm so grateful that, I mean, I know I'm super enthusiastic and I hunted you, and I'm not afraid of anyone, right? So I was just like, I'm getting in there, and my enthusiasm sometimes can roll on into a roller coaster. And I'm so appreciative that you took the time, to come away from your family and your personal time to spend it with us, because and it's something that these episodes that we do when we invite someone on are just so inspirational, and and I just love supporting women and giving back, because these were things that I never got. And so now it's like I've got the tools and the voice to do so. And I'm just so thankful that you were so willing to come on and just embrace it and us. So yeah.
So if you haven't seen the movie, go see it because it's badass.
It's Perpetrators is on Shudder, which is all through North America and Australia and New Zealand, and AMC Plus.
Yeah, AMC Plus, and also you can just buy it.
Yeah,
that too. Is there anything else, Jennifer, that we should keep an eye out for? You've got coming up, or
I mean, I've got two new. I've written two new scripts that are. One is a gnarly, like a righteous kind of gnarly action story, a kind of female-led history of violence. Speaking of Cronenberg again.
Yeah.
And the other one is an adaptation of a short story by the American novelist Juliana Baggett, who's got one of her other stories is just got released on Netflix. It's called Run Rabbit Run. So she's a really, really interesting American novelist. And so her short story Nest, which is just like, you know, it came to me because someone said, I feel like you could have written this. And Juliana and I have become really good friends. And so I've adapted that short story. And so, I mean, I think top of 2024, I'm gonna be back in production. And yeah, I'm only trying to. I don't actually have to convince Alicia to come do another film with me. She's sort of on a pretty regular basis, like when are we doing something else again together? You know, so I don't know.
Good.
I pinch myself realizing that someone who I consider a friend right now is Cher Horowitz from Clueless. That's pretty cool.
Awesome.
So
It's
it's so
wild.
cool.
Life is wild sometimes. It really is.
Yeah.
And you can follow Jennifer, you know, on socials, on Twitter and Instagram, as well. You can follow Bonnie, Jenna, and I. We're all on the same Bonnie Girl for Bonnie. I'm Renee Ruin on absolutely everything, so you can't miss me. And I'm not going to do yours, Jenna, because they're so hard. So I'll get you to do yours.
Well, you can always find me 24 hours a day at Twitter. Well, it's not Twitter anymore.
I still call it Twitter.
At x.com/Jenna Haze, Instagram.com/Jenna Haze, Facebook and TikTok, I'm the real Jenna Haze. And of course, I have my spicy site, so you can always check that out. Even though I'm retired, and I've been retired for 12 years, I still have
spicy everywhere. I think you should promote your spicy no matter if you're retired or not, because your OnlyFans is awesome. So
queen of spice.
I don't know. My spicy site is pretty artsy though now, so
that's fine. My spicy side has glitter, so that's all.
I love it. I love all of it.
Well, thank you so much again, Jennifer. This was an honor.
Absolutely.
It's just such a I love these experiences because we like when Jenna, Bonnie, and I come together, we're always sore cheeks, giggling, and like come away so like pumped and inspired to do things. And then having someone like you on just is fuel to the fire. So it's just amazing, and it's so great to be able to showcase amazing, you know, female works and just supporting, giving back, and that's what we love to do here. So thank you again so much for coming on. And
anytime, honestly, I'll make another film only if I can come back.
Yeah.
You don't even need to ask, it's a given.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you everybody for watching as well.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.